Hey everyone, Soly the Scourge here, bringing you a build of the brand new Warlock. Now I'm going to focus a bit more on synergy. This is going to be a DPS build. If you're interested in the healing build, I will get around to that in the next day or two. So please stay subscribed to the channel. Keep an eye out for it. But this build is going to focus a lot on synergy, a lot on what's changed, because I'm not going to get too particularly attached to any one specific thing, understanding that this is the initial preview build, and a lot of these powers will probably change over time. So let's go back down to general here. We have Hellfire Expertise. This is a Paragon skill for being a Hellbringer. Your spells focus on the power of Hellfire, burning and scorching the souls of those who stand in your way. Fire and necrotic damage dealt is increased by 25%, recharge speed increased by 30%, and soul sparks are now gained on critical strikes. Okay, so critical strikes is going to be an important stat for the Scourge Warlock. Eldridge Blast grants a soul spark for each enemy hit. Dark Spiral Aurora now generates one spark for each Dark Spiral used. Okay, so we see a focus on critical strike here for the Warlock. When damaged, you have a 5% chance to apply a lesser curse to your attacker. This kind of basically meaningless. 5% is a low percentage chance. You have to intentionally try to take damage, which is usually a bad strategy. And that damage has to come from a creature. There's easier ways to get a lesser curse on a target, and we're going to cover this. So this is basically meaningless, in my opinion. Then we have increase your critical severity by 10%, devastating critical. Okay, this one actually reads the same thing. Increase your critical severity by 10%. I assume they're supposed to be things. Again, this is an initial preview build, but we're seeing a focus on critical strike as an important thing. Critical strike to generate soul sparks, high crit severity on the Warlock. This is just your collection skill that you can interact with Arcana nodes. And this is my human feat. You gain a bonus 250 points to all your ratings, offensive and defensive. You can see it says racial here, so I assume that's my bonus for being a human on the preview server. Alright, there's also massive changes to the mechanics. So here's our lesser curse. Your encounter powers that do not have a Warlock's curse consume or curse synergy apply lesser curse to all enemies hit. This deals damage over the next 8 seconds, counts as a curse for power interactions, and does not stack. So the important thing to note here is in order to place a lesser curse on the enemies, right, because you don't want to mess around with a low 5% chance on taking damage, you're going to have to use an encounter power in your rotation that does not have curse consume or curse synergy. I've got that set up. We'll get to more on that later, but I'm going to keep going through these new mechanics here. We have Soul Puppet making a return. So you can summon a Soul Puppet to fight alongside you. A lot of the feats later on down at the bottom revolve around the Soul Puppet if you choose to go a Soul Puppet type build. You can only have a single Soul Puppet, and it'll follow you for 20 seconds, then dissipate. Again, some of the feats will change that for you. It's got stats, that's fine. If you attempt to summon a Soul Puppet when you already have one, your current Soul Puppet has its duration refreshed and is fully healed. You also gain a stack of Soul Investor, which increases the damage of your Soul Puppet by 20% for 20 seconds. This effect can stack 5 times. So you see Soul Investor make your return. I am going to jump down to say, okay, it increases your damage of your Soul Puppet. Maybe that's good, maybe that's bad, but you can also make it increase your own encounter damage for each stack you have with risky investment down here. Again, it's only going to be encounter damage. Again, the game's changed a lot, where a lot of builds are having a hard time firing off encounters because of recovery is gone. That's a big thing that they are trying to cut down in this mod, is making you use encounter powers less. So keep that in mind. We're going to go to our shift, Shadow Slip. Cast time, negative 0.2 seconds. That seems pretty good. I don't know why it displays a negative value, but that seems pretty fast, right? But it is a quick run speed. It does say you ignore control effects while shifted. I'm not sure if this is new or not. I haven't really played around with it a lot, but you still have Shadow Slip, so that's good. And then we see Soul Spark as a mechanic that is in the Hellbringer DPS build. So various spells will grant you a Soul Spark. You can have up to 30 Soul Sparks at any given time. They passively increase your damage dealt by 0.25 each. So 4 Soul Sparks grants you a 1% DPS increase. When you're out of combat, a Soul Spark will be consumed every half a second, healing you. So that's pretty normal. It's basically a little bit extra regen until you have 6 Soul Sparks left. So you're always going to have 6 Soul Sparks, basically. If you have less, according to this, if you have less than 6 Soul Sparks, they will regenerate to 6, which is going to be a 1.5% flat DPS increase, and then you keep building on that as you get more Soul Sparks. You can also choose to use the Soul Sparks because your tab now, instead of placing a Warlock's Curse on it, is Soul Scourge, which used to be an attack. Now it's in here in the mechanics. You expend at least 6 Soul Sparks. Again, they kind of want you to have a base 6 to blast a foe with Blackfire, dealing heavy damage immediately and then minor damage over the next 6 seconds. Now this doesn't have a magnitude listed, so how much damage this is, that's going to require more testing. But enemies radiate intense heat, dealing damage to their allies around them. So they kind of made it so where you should always be able to at least fire this off, or you can keep building more and more Soul Sparks and keep that flat DPS percentage increase. But because this is now your tab, this is now your right bumper, is the way I understand it, placing a lesser curse is more important because you can't just throw a curse on things at will. So again, your encounter powers that do not have a Warlock's Curse consume or Curse synergy will apply a lesser curse to all enemies hit. So I've got kind of an initial rotation here of Hadar's Grasp. Now this is one of those powers that will put a lesser curse on because it doesn't have those curse synergies, those curse consumes. It's a very, very low cooldown. It's also a very, very low magnitude attack. It's not going to deal a lot of damage here. But it does have a knockdown. It's going to provide some party utility. Like I said, this is kind of an opener to unlock other curse synergies because it's an AoE damage that can layer a lesser curse on all enemies. And lesser curse adds damage too, so even though it's not listed in the magnitude, lesser curse itself can add damage. Then we can switch over to Curse Bites. It's something a lot of Warlocks are currently using. Still in the game. Still has 2 charges. However, you can't hit this back to back because now it rips the curse off the target. It does curse consume. So what you have to understand is that you need this low cooldown encounter so that you can curse everything, rip the curse off with a Curse Bites at magnitude 250, curse everything again, rip the curses off with Curse Bite, and deal good AoE damage. Then I've got just Killing Flames listed. By the time you've done that, throw in a couple other attacks, maybe your daily, your mount, your artifact powers, maybe you're ready to finish something. You can see here it's got a really high magnitude. You can spawn a soul puppet still. Killing Flames, basically the same. You get it more damage, as the target's health goes down. So I guess we might as well cover all the other encounter powers. You have Vampiric Embrace. Again, it's actually got a good magnitude here, 250. That's the base Killing Flames, without an enemy missing health. So decent magnitude. You're going to get, heals, temporary hit points on Curse Consume, good defensive power. Again, you've got to keep in mind these cooldowns are now really high, 10 seconds. You have Dread Theft, high magnitude, but no debuff is the main thing. I don't know if I want to be messing around with Dread Theft without the debuff, without the party utility, trying to line up the beams right. It does have a curse synergy to basically keep refreshing lesser curses, but because it has curse synergy, it won't put the lesser curse on itself, which to me is kind of a big drawback. Hater's Grasp, still looking good. 200 magnitude, still has the stun, still has the a small duration. You can get that up with a Curse Consume, but again, because it has a Curse Consume, you know, it's not going to put a lesser curse on. However, this is a way to get a Soul Puppet. You summon a Soul Puppet on the Curse Consume, which is going to be good for those Soul Puppet builds that are looking to stack Soul Investure. So I will say that, again, a 14, almost a 15-second cooldown is what you have to realize with this. It does have a good cast time, though. I think it's a good single target power. We'll talk about single target more once we get through more of this stuff. Fiery Bolt, still doing about the same thing. You know, Curse Energy, surrounding targets now take full damage from the blast. But the magnitude on it is pretty low, and again, you got a 9-second cooldown. So I can go try to do a Fiery Bolt strategy of magnitude 160 on a 9-second cooldown, or I can try to do 2 charges of Curse Bites on 250 magnitude. Now, the Fiery Bolt is a little bit easier because it doesn't require the full setup of cursing things twice, because Curse Bites is going to remove the initial curse, so you've got to curse, remove, reapply, and then remove again. But the higher magnitude probably wins out, is going to be my guess. Here you have Infernal Spears, a little bit of a defensive stat. You know, each sphere adds 1000 defense, low cooldowns, but I don't think it's worth messing around. Blades of Vanquished Army, again, is still kind of a defensive type power. You still have blades that follow you. They can fire out if you curse things. You know, added effect 5000 deflect. And then the new power, which has a placeholder, Hellfire Ring. Now this is a contender to replace Hater's Grasp as the initial thing that curses everything, right? You don't see any curse energies or curse consumes. And it's an AoE, basically, circle, you know, a ring of fire. It's got good magnitude, add effect DOT, good damage on the DOT, long duration on the DOT. However, look at that cooldown, 22.2 seconds. To me, and again, this is going to be locked. I left my character at level 70 so that you can see what to expect when you first log in. I will be leveling my character up and playing the new content, but while I'm making these guides, I want to give it from a level 70 perspective. That's why you can see it's unavailable. But to get back to my point, the cooldown is 22.2 seconds, so while the damage looks really good, you have to realize that you're not going to be casting this a lot. You might be able to use it on the first mob, but by the time you get to the second mob, it probably won't be available, right? So that's why if you're trying to enable these curse synergies, for now I'm going to be going with a low cooldown Arms of Hater, because I can cast 10, 11 Arms of Hater in the time I can cast a single Hellfire Ring. So that's something to keep in mind. We're going to get up here to the at-wills. Eldridge Blast, still kind of focusing on generating Soul Sparks. But Dark Spiral Aurora does the same. Now, there's no AP gain here, but the magnitude's good still. You know, you collect Dark Spirals. Again, I think it was this one that tells you Eldritch Blast now generates 1 Soul Spark for each enemy hit. Dark Spiral Aurora now generates 1 Soul Spark for each Dark Spiral used. So again, it's going to help you generate them Soul Sparks. Hellish Rebuke, also really great at generating Soul Sparks. With the DOT, you can take off the DOT. We're going to get into class features, but I recommend leaving the DOT on, because added effect generates 1 Soul Spark for each DOT tick, duration 10 seconds. So that's a lot of Soul Sparks. Again, Soul Sparks you can use to Soul Scourge, you can use just as a flat boost to your DPS overall. So layering Hellish Rebuke on some enemies around here is actually pretty nice, while that DOT is ticking. And then we have Hand of Blight, now locked behind level 72. This could be a good way to also try to, you know, people have liked this. I personally haven't, but just because it's so quick And you know, they like to build up stacks with Flames of Empowerment, different things. You know, when you attack with your at-will powers, you stack a flat DPS increase. I personally haven't liked this. I don't know. The problem I've always had is in order to do this right, you have to go into melee range. Being in melee range is now more dangerous than ever. The game's a lot harder. So I'm personally not looking forward to this, but, you know, I realize a lot of people in the Warlock community do like this, so it's still there. Let's go to dailies. So you have a Curse Souls. It's basically doing the same thing. Applies a lesser curse. Again, applying lesser curse is important now. Add effect, spawn a soul puppet on activation. So this is going to be good in soul puppet builds because it's going to basically give you a stack of soul investure. But I'm still, at least on this AoE build, going with Brood of Hadar. It's just quicker, right? It's 1.3 seconds compared to 2 seconds. So I can basically sneak in another attack along with this. You can see magnitude 1400, basically AoE, but a lot stronger single target. It's got the slow. I've just always liked Brood of Hadar as a quick way to use your daily. You have Tyrannical Curse. This is a bit interesting. Increases damage received by you by 20%. Added effect, target is damage linked, passing on 15% of the damage you deal to them to other targets. So you still kind of get this spread where you can use Tyrannical Curse to turn basically your single target powers into AoE target or AoE damage, you know, by hitting other enemies that are around it. We have Gates of Hell. Now, again, as part of the effects of them cutting back on recovery, cutting back on AP regeneration, action point regeneration, we see that Gates of Hell no longer gives that action point gain bonus when you kill enemies. So it's probably not worth it, especially when you have to line up and hit the skill shot in the first place. And then we have Flames here. Drips damage over time on the enemies, intense heat, dealing 20% of its damage to nearby enemies. Again, we have a magnitude here of 1,250 compared to 2,200, with Flames being a little bit more focused on AoE damage. So they're going to be roughly the same. I don't think you can go that wrong either way. Class features, Shadow Walk is looking alright. It's always been a little bit of a defensive thing, right? You can run faster so you can get away from damage. Your deflect is increased, but now your crit strike is increased, which is kind of appealing, right? Again, the Warlock is going to rely a bit on crit strike more than other classes because of that crit severity. When we compare it to something like Prince of Hell, that is only 2,500 armor pen. Sorry, my voice is starting to go. I've been talking a lot. Increases your armor pen, again, by 2,500. That's just a flat stat increase. Why would you do that when you can have 2,500 crit strike, but also the additional deflection, the additional run speed? So Prince of Hell makes absolutely no sense to me. They need to buff this or change this. Dark One's Blessing. Whenever a target affected by your lesser curse dies, you'll generate a soul spark and heal for 1% more your health. This probably doesn't help you a lot because, you know, when things are dying, then you're dropping out of combat, then you're losing these soul sparks up already because you're out of combat. So this is just really a healing type thing. Out of combat doesn't really do much. Your lesser curse deals 25 magnitude whenever it is applied to the enemy. I have this slot on right now. Again, I'm looking to curse enemies, remove it with curse bites, curse enemies, remove it with curse bites. This just adds a little bit of extra damage to that kind of rotation. You know, if you want to go defensive with something like Shadow Walk, that's fine. All-consuming curse. Your at-will powers now apply lesser curse to enemies hit. This is what I was talking about with alternatives. If you want to try to get in melee range, try to fire off Hand of Blight, you know, multiple times to try to get a lesser curse that way. You can also go that route. It's probably not the route I'm focusing on here. No Pity, No Mercy. This is where you can turn Hellish Rebuke into an initial blast and take away the DOT. It will get you a little bit of a boost to Soul Sparks, but it's not going to generate nearly as many Soul Sparks as leaving it on DOT. Again, you're going to have combat advantage here, but I'm going to assume that other classes are probably going to be able to still grant you combat advantage. Maybe not. Maybe the game's completely changed. A lot of it has. But I'm going to assume I'm not going to need combat advantage here, and somebody else in the party is just going to give it to me. That brings us to Flame's Empowerment. Again, when you use your at-wills, you can stack it up and get a flat DPS percent increase. You know, increases damage against the target by 1%, stacks 3 times. Then we have Dark Prayers. When your hit points are below 30%, gain 250 defense. Again, this seems really bad because I can just gain 2,500. Sorry, it was 2,500 defense. But I can gain 2,500 of a stat, not have to worry about taking damage here. And even this is a bad feat because why gain 2,500 a stat when I can gain 5,000 total stat and have increased run speed? So these ones at the end just really don't make sense, compared to Shadow Walk. So again, that's if you want flat stats. If you want kind of unique powers, I've got Deadly Curse and Flames of Empowerment on for now. Alright, we're almost through the DPS spec. We're getting here to the feats. So we have Powers of the 9 Hells is what I have chosen. Your daily powers now grant 12 Soul Sparks when first cast. So what you got to realize, again, is that 4 Soul Sparks equals 1% DPS. So this basically means your daily power gives you plus 3% DPS. And then you can alternatively choose to expend those Soul Sparks on a Soul Scourge to do damage if you want, or you can just keep that DPS increase. The one I didn't pick was Soul Scourge deals damage over time, and then this effect can be increased with Double Scourge. You can increase that DOT portion by 10%. We have Warlock's Curse. You deal 5% more damage to targets affected with Lesser Curse. Again, putting that Lesser Curse on is going to be important. So I have that, so another percentage-based DPS increase. The alternative is Parting Blast from me. Whenever Lesser Curse is removed from a target, deal 100% of your weapon damage. I would rather have flat percentage DPS than this basically weapon damage proc. We have Creeping Death, still in the game, but not really a capstone. Now it's put in the middle of the feat tree, and it's doing a lot less than it used to. So when you deal damage with your at-will encounter daily powers to enemies, you can infect them with Creeping Death. Deals 10% additional damage as necrotic damage over 5 seconds. So 10% additional DOT here. I have that over Soul Desecration, which is basically the first linchpin in the Soul Puppet build, because this makes it so that your Soul Puppet no longer disappears. It also deals 10% more damage, and you automatically have a Soul Puppet at all times. So again, you're going to be making a choice. Do I want to have the Soul Puppet permanently, or do I want to have extra damage in the form of DOT? So risky investment, I've already covered a little bit. That's the Soul Investor. When you basically summon additional Soul Puppets when you already have one, you can gain stacks, and then now your stacks can have 5% bonus to encounter damage for each stack you have. Also, again, I'm just going with the flat DPS percent increases here. Your powers deal up to 10% more damage as your target's health diminishes. Executioner's Gift. Then we get into the 80 ones. We have Soul Spark Recovery. Every 6 Soul Sparks spent on Soul Scourge reduces your encounter cooldowns by 1 second. So here, again, you can generate Soul Sparks to get flat DPS increase, then you can use them to deal damage, and then reduce all your encounters by 1 second. Pretty good. The alternative is also encounter power reduction speed. So whenever your Soul Puppet attacks, your encounter cooldowns are reduced by half a second. So you can Soul Scorch to reduce encounter powers by 1 second, or you can just have a Soul Puppet attacking passively, and get those cooldown timers on. So this actually makes the Soul Puppet build very interesting to me as a potential boss build, right? Because when you're running through mobs, the companion AI, the Soul Puppet AI, can be unpredictable. Sometimes it attacks, sometimes it goes and does its own thing. A lot of times it's running around. When there's a single boss target, it tends to perform better. And here, as long as it just keeps attacking a boss, you're reducing your encounter cooldowns. So then you can start doing more of a single target build. I'm not going to get too much into it, but you can start using some of these things that have longer cooldowns. So like something like Hater's Grasp, which has a 14-second, almost a 15-second cooldown, you can start reducing that with your Soul Puppet. Here you see it's meant to work with the Soul Puppet build because you can summon another Soul Puppet on top of it, which gives you a stack of Soul Investure. This happens when you're curse consuming. So you start seeing a single target Soul Puppet type build emerge from here. Again, you're going to have Killing Flames, 11-second cooldown. You can get that down. You can go something like Vampiric Embrace. Now this isn't going to put a lesser curse on, it's going to be your problem. But if you're just looking to tank up and do something defensive, again, the magnitude's not bad on it, 250. The magnitude on Hater's Grasp is only 200. So you start seeing maybe a Soul Puppet single target build emerge. But for AoE, I would recommend going the way that I have. I'm going to cover one last thing here as part of the DPS Warlock. You have to realize that ability scores have changed, which is going to be very contentious because a lot of people pick certain things under a certain understanding of the system. Constitution no longer gives me a flat damage increase now. It gives me maximum hit points and AP gain. While we have Intelligence now giving control bonus, but also a bonus to magical damage. Although here I've got a lot of points spent in it, and it says +0. So we can see this isn't fully reworked yet. We see kind of the initial changes they seem to be making here. Here we have Strength giving a physical damage boost. Charisma, which used to be a main primary stat, no longer shows different colors for primary and secondary stats. So they seem to be doing a rework here. I might put a separate video on this because I know if you're watching still, you're probably a Warlock main, and so I realize not everyone's going to see this part. But here we have companion stat bonus change, recharge speed. So I'm not going to go too much into it because it looks like work's still being done, but I thought I'd make a note of that. So I hope this helps you. Again, stay subbed to the channel. If you were interested in seeing the healing build, I'm going to be working on that next. So thank you very much.